So Floral, which is short for Fluent URL. So the idea is we do a lot of with microservices and things like that. You know, you make a lot of calls out to services from your code, and the HTTP client that comes with .NET could be better. It gets a lot of people in trouble a lot of times because they'll start one up and they won't clean it up, and they won't handle it properly, and it ends up eating up a lot of memory and doing some other nasty things. So part of what this does is helps that out. It also makes it a lot easier to build URLs. So a lot of times, you know, you're building URLs and you have to worry about all the special characters and making sure you have enough correct slashes between things and stuff like that. So this Floral is actually 2 parts. The first part is just managing URLs. We'll look at that first. And then the second part is actually making calls out to endpoints. And then there's also a testing piece to it too, which I want to get into at the end, so you can see how you can do testing with this stuff, because that's one of the also difficult things a lot of people have is unit testing their code when they have calls out to services beyond their applications and stuff. So first things first, let's see where we can go find this thing. So we'll look here. There is a couple of different Floral entries I've found. But basically, this one is the one that manages the HTTP client or HTTP, the URL string. And this one's the one that actually goes out and makes the calls. So this one, if you just get this one, it includes the first one. This is the one you probably want. There's a couple others here that they've been working on to get some signed stuff for assemblies and things like that. But if you're just going to play around with it, these are just fine. We've used these at the place I work at, and you know, no issues. So if we go and grab this, install it, and you'll see, oh, come on, mouse getting a little sluggish, that it includes Floral 3.0.4 and a bunch of other stuff, including Newtonsoft JSON. There is another one, another Floral sitting around here somewhere, and I don't see it right here off the list. I'm sure it's in there somewhere, that says it's just Floral without any of the extension, any of the these other pieces to it. You can get that and use it, but it does have issues. You do have to end up pulling these things in anyway if you want to really use it. So it's easier just to get the Floral HTTP one and go from there. All right. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through just playing around with the URL, see what we get on here. So, you know, a lot of times you have, well, it would help if I actually use it, doesn't it? So using Floral. All right. So now we've done this, we now have extensions on our, it basically extends string out. So, oh, the other thing we're going to do is we're going to be using JSON placeholder. Anybody play with that at all? Know what it is? So this endpoint is a way for you to go out and test some of your code if you want to, without actually having to stand up anything. It has a couple different endpoints that you can see for posts and to-dos and some other stuff in there too. We'll just play around with it a little bit so you can see what it's like. But anyway, so this is usually what you end up doing is you type out a URL, right? And you want to use this. But in our case, what we want to do is we want to actually have another piece to this URL. Now, you could just put it in here. You could just do it like this, right? But that makes managing the URLs a little more difficult because a lot of times what you'll want to do is you'll want to just set up a base URL and go from there. So what we're going to do is we're going to append a segment onto our URL. So this does exactly what I just showed before. So now we've got this, and it throws post in at the end, right? And that's pretty straightforward. And again, a lot of times you look at this and say, well, I could do that myself, and you could, but understand that there's a lot more complicated things that you'd end up with as you work through your endpoints that you want to hit through your programs and stuff. And just so we can see what this does generate, we can just, we'll just send it out there. So if we run this, and it first time run, it might take a second or two, and I apologize, and I'll bring the output over once it gets stood up here. And there it is. Of course, it throws it on the wrong monitor, but that's all right. So, all right, so you can see it did exactly what we could have done by hand, but it makes it a little easier, and it puts the slash in for us. So we don't have to sit here and play around with all that stuff. We don't have to worry about if there was a slash there or not. And I believe if we did put a slash on the end of this, it should still run it pretty much the same way. And it does. See? So it doesn't care. It checks first before it adds it on the end. So you can see how this is starting to just a little bit help you out a little bit. There's some other things you can look at now that you've got this this URL sitting out here with all this stuff on it. So you could look at the, for example, the scheme, right? You could look at the host. Port. We don't have a port in here. I can put one on so you can see what it looks like. You can look at the query string. Again, we don't have a query string on here, but you could look at that and it would pull that out. There's fragments. There's a couple other things that are interesting to look at. We won't look at fragments because there's really, I'm not going to do anything with fragments, but there is relative. So if you didn't have the entire URL there, it was just a relative URL to someplace, you could check for that. And then the other thing that a lot of people like to look at is secure scheme. So you can see here we are using a secure scheme, that's HTTPS. And then we can just show what this looks like. Oops, it helps if I end it and actually put that semicolon on there. That's one. So Visual Studio 2022 tries to help you out a lot. You can see it's helping me out a lot when I'm typing. And it shows that semicolon there, and I get the impression it's there sometimes, when it's not. So it happens. All right, so you can see this is our scheme, HTTPS. This is the host part, right? We don't have a port. We don't have a query. It is not relative because we give it the full URL, and it is secure, right? Because it's got HTTPS on it. You can see you can use some of these things as you're going through your code just to verify that you've got things set up the way you want when you're writing your code. Pretty cool. So let's just, throw something on here. We'll do 8080 just for the hell of it. Since this isn't really making a call to anything just yet, we're just playing around with the string, but you can see there it is. So now I've got my port number on there. So a lot of times what you're doing when you're doing development work and stuff is you have the port go to something local. Or even if you go out and post these things up onto, Azure or AWS or something like that, you may also put a port number on there and when you do development work, just to make sure that it's not using the real one. You can do all that stuff and then all that checking inside your code if you wanted to. So that's interesting. And by the way, if there's any questions, just let me know. I will bring up the chat over here in case any, or you can raise your hand and do things that way. All right, so let's talk about things that start getting a little more complicated, like query strings. So I can set query parameters. So there's two different ways you can do it. We're just doing one at a time here. I'm going to do multiple ones. So, sorry, do multiple ones. And You could do that by putting in like an API key if you had that. You have a client that you want to have in your, we'll put Philly.net. And what else could we put in here? Oh, let's put some text on here that is I'm going to put an apostrophe on there, even though it's not. Exclamation mark at the end. There you go. That looks good. All right. And then let's just throw out the URL again. It'll take a look and see what it looks like. I'm going to get rid of some of these just so don't have a whole bunch of output showing up, but we'll just comment that out for now. All right. So there's a URL. I still have that 8080 on there. I should probably take that off. Posts. There's the API key that I set up. Some key client equals Philly.net. Some text equals. This is some text that gets encoded correctly. So that's pretty cool. So you can programmatically add in your query parameters without having to sit there and play around with the ampersands and the question marks and all the other stuff that goes with it and equal signs. It just builds it correctly for you. That's pretty cool. Let's take a look what we could do with that. If you were, for example, to get a URL and you wanted to pull it apart, you could. So let's say for each, and we'll do, we'll say value, in that query. But, you know. Hey. Okay, so we can give this a shot. Take a look. See what we get. So there's all our stuff pulled back apart again, and you can see that the encoded stuff is now not encoded because we're actually using it as a value. So you can play around with this, and it works pretty well. All right. And I apologize if you hear my wife in the background on her call. All right. So any questions so far? Nothing. I'm either really good or you're all asleep. Okay. You can also do other really weird query things. Some places will get a little strange with their query parameters. Let's say you had something called paging, I don't know, and it had multiple values that you wanted to pass in. You could do that too, if you really wanted to get weird. All right, and then we'll just copy this down here. This works the same way, and we'll just comment this guy out just so we don't see it anymore. And we probably don't need to see this again because that's just a bunch of mess. And if we run this, we can see, so there's all our stuff. So we've got the first three that we did, and then here's the next three. So you can see, you can just keep appending onto it. You don't have to do it all in one shot. And this one all is the same value, same name, paging, and the values with multiple values going into it. So that's how that would look. Probably I should have also included the URL down here, just to You can see what it would look like when it actually gets sent out. So there it is. So you can see here's the paging stuff, paging 1, paging 2, paging 3 gets stuck to the end. Everything works the way it's supposed to. So that's interesting. All right. So any questions about any of this stuff? You can see how you can manipulate all this stuff. There are headers you can add to it, a bunch of other things you can do as well. But I wanted to get into the next part, which is the Floral HTTP stuff. So let's go. Let's add this up at the top. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually start making calls out. And probably what I want to do is just to make my life easier, I'm going to take this and I'm going to just make it a constant up here. So we'll make constant string, call it base URL equals that. Well, it helps if I put quotes around it, doesn't it? All right. There. Okay. So now I got a base URL that I can play with. All right. So what you can do with when you call the HTTP part is it'll actually go out and make a call, and it'll come back with a response value. And the response value has all the things that would normally come back from a HTTP call, including the headers, status code, as well as the body of it. So let's take a look and actually make a call out to that URL. And these are all URL dot. And we're going to append the path segment here, right here. Do it all one shot if you want to. You don't have to. Get async. Okay. So what this is going to do is it's going to go out and hit this endpoint. So the base URL plus the post at the end, and it's going to come back with a result object that we can look at. So normally one of the things you want to look at normally is the status code, right? So, oops, didn't want to do string. I wanted status. So we can see what happens here. So let me just get rid of some of these other things so we don't have a bunch of extra crap here. We don't need that. Okay. All right, so let's take a look, see what we get for status code. Thinking about it. Oops, hit the wrong button. Sorry. Oh, I got an error. What did I get an error for? Oh, that's because I misspelled it. Good job, Rob. Okay. There. All right, let's try again. That's better. All right, so you can see we got a response code of 200, which is what we were expecting. But there's a lot more stuff inside a result. So let's take a look and see if we can see what else we get back with the result. So let's say I know that this endpoint has a crap ton of headers that it passes back. So let's see what we got here. We'll do again, same thing, right? Name, value, in result dot headers. Well, more than just that. We'll just throw a name out there. Just this value. So let's take a look at this. All right, so you can see there's our 200, that's our response code. And then here's are all the headers. We got date, transfer code, connection, all that stuff. And all this stuff is available to us. And that's cool. Okay. So we didn't have to get it, you know, all in one shot. We've got this in this result package, this result object over here that we can go and inspect and take a look at. All right, well, that's great. But most of the time, you really don't care about that so much. Although some things you do, there might be, you know, e tags or other things in there, things that would you would need to consume, and you can do that. You can store them once you read it from the header. But the other thing you want to do is take a look at the body, right? So we can get the body. Right now, I'm just gonna throw it out directly to the output. And what we're going to do is we're going to just get it as a string. Now, I know it really isn't I mean, it is a string, but it really would be better as an object, a JSON object. And we're going to look at that in a second. But I just wanted to show you that, yeah, you can just grab the stuff and pull the things right out as a string. All these are extensions that HTTP, the Floral HTTP gives you. So let's take a look at this.
David already came up and got rid of that for you.
So, and there's all the output, and there's a lot of it, right? So now we can see, okay, well, I can see what this is. This has got a user ID, an ID, a title, a body. These are the posts, right? And obviously it's just garbage data, but that's okay. It all comes out and we can see it all, and that's cool. So probably what we want to do, we probably want to create a class that would look like the object we want it to be, right? So let's see. Got lost for a second here. Hang on a second. I apologize. Rather than watch you type me all this in, type all this stuff in, I'm just going to copy it. So this is the post class. So this is what we've got, right? We've got an integer, a couple of integers, a couple of strings. That's what it looks like. Okay. So what we want to do now is we want to get this out as an actual JSON object, and it's a list of them. So it's an array of objects, right? So I want to get it out. Get JSON. Sorry. JSON async, right? And it's an IEnumerable. Posts. That looks good. All right, so we do this. We should have an array of posts sitting over here, right? That would make sense. So let's just take a quick look and do for each, and we'll just throw out the title. Right. And we'll take a look at it like this. So I'm going to get rid of this one. Sorry, this one. And the headers too, because we don't need to look at that every time now. We'll still leave our status code just to make sure we're getting back 200. And there it is. So now we put everything into a JSON array of posts, right? So that's pretty easy to do. So you can see all we do is say just get JSON async. Now we can also do it a couple other ways. We could say get JSON list async, and it would come back with a dynamic array of posts. But you know, that's just a different way we can do it. There's a couple different things we could do to get stuff back. You saw the string and some other stuff like that. So it all works pretty cool. So any questions so far? Does this seem useful? Yeah. Yes, no? You can come off mute if you want to. That's fine. All right. So there's some other things out there. There's a to-do out there. So let's take a look at that. We'll do something very similar to the to-dos, but this time we're just going to call it directly. So we're not going to go and create a result object. You don't have to do it that way. You can just go ahead and call it. Get rid of this for a second. We can just go ahead and say, you know, I just want to get a result set from the body. I don't care about the headers. I don't care about anything else. Just give me back, you know, the thing I want. So we can do that by just using the base URL to start with. And we're going to append path segment. It helps, you know, if you actually do it the right way, doesn't it?
Yes, I know.
Add segment.
I was shredding some paper.
Let's see. JSON. Why is it a big? Oh, geez. You know, looking at 3 different things at once sometimes can be problematic. There we go. Get JSON async, and we're going to do another enumerable, and this is going to be to do. There we go. That should do it. So we can just go call it directly. We don't have to call that the way we did it up here, where we said I want to get the results, and then from the results I'm going to pull that out and get the posts. So if you just want to get something directly back, you can do it. It's not like it's required that you do it this way. You can do it this way.
All right.
And again, let's see. Oh, you probably love me watching me type here for this stuff, but. I don't want to do to do. I want to write out. Let's see. What do I want to do? The title and completed, since that's, you know, probably the only thing that's really useful to us right now. And yeah, that should be interesting. See what happens in this. So yeah, there's a lot of to-dos out here, and you can see there's some that are true, some that are false. There's the title. It all works pretty well. All right, cool. So there's an awful lot there. You know, we probably only want to work with one of them at a time. So, you know, let's change our path segment. Okay. So let's say, just go back up here to where I did it. Oh, right here, right? Yeah. Okay. So let's change this and make it a little easier for me to read it. Oddly enough, I think it goes this way. And append path segment. And I believe if I did that right, we should end up with a single a single one. And let's see, I change this here. Yeah. Now the question is, does it? Well, we'll give it a shot. See if this breaks it or not. There you go. All right, so those are only the ones for the first user. So you can see there's significantly less of them. There's only 20 instead of the 100 that was there before. So you can see how I just did that. I just said, well, we're just going to keep appending stuff to it to get to the right spot, and we'll pull it out. And there you go. So that worked. So that's also useful, right? Let's see. Is there anything else we wanted to check on? Yeah. Let's play around with this a little bit. Let's use some other verbs here. So everything we've been doing so far has been gets. So let's change this. And we're going to do a patch. And you can do patches, you can delete, you can do posts, those kind of things. But we'll just do a quick one here. And we'll call it patch result. Dot and passing. So what we're going to do is we're going to update the first, the ID 1 of to-dos, and this is what I'm building here. But what you really care about is this part here. So you can say patch JSON async, and we'll do it that way. And we're going to change completed equals true. Now, the thing is, and it's because we're sending in a JSON object, it needs to sort of be this way. Clearly, on our output, we were pulling back a Boolean, but and it would be converted into a Boolean based off of the way JSON and the Newtonsoft stuff works. But when we're passing stuff in, we got to sort of send it in as a JSON object because that's what I told it I was doing. So I'm passing it in as a JSON object. So this should work. And let's see. Let's take a look at the patch result dots. Sorry. Patch result dot status code. Oh. Go. And there's probably, well, let's just run this first and we'll see if it actually works. All right. Get a status code back. And I think the status code they get back is probably the wrong one. They give back a 200, really shouldn't be a 200, but that's okay. There's the 200 from the status code we just did. So that's the patch. But let's take a look and see. It also returns back, in this case, I happen to know, it returns back the result of what we just did. So if we just say, and I'm just going to do it the short way, async because that's the easiest way to do this. And run it again. Oh, sorry. My bad. I need to do an await here. There we go. There we go. So you can see I set it to true. It was false. It now set to true. So any questions about that? There are a whole bunch of verbs you can use. You can also build your own if the verbs or if the structure that you're sending to doesn't quite fit correctly. There are ways you can build your own URL to make the calls out there correctly. But I'll put a link to the Floral website in the chat. Oh, sorry. How can I pass authentication? Okay. Yes. You can pass authentication. And you can pass in headers. So if you wanted to, let's just take a quick look here, see if I can remember exactly how this works. But basically, let's see, the new URL. Oh, dot. Is it a pen? No. Sorry, hang on a second. I'll get you there. See, it's funny because a lot of these things, you know, you set up and then you forget about. Oh, it's with. That's what it is. So yes, sorry, not with. So with there's basic auth, which is, you know, you're passing in a username and password, and there's also OAuth. So you can say with OAuth error token. So both those ways work. So you can pass in your tokens to it as well. So let's see. JSON placeholder. What was the question about that? Can JSON placeholder typecode.com be anything? Well, in this case, it is, and I can post that link too. Let me post these links in the chat first. Here's the Fluent one, the Floral one. So there's that one. And then let's see if I can, I think I have that website sitting up here somewhere. Where are you, Mr.? Sorry, I got to find it now. Oh, there it is. JSON placeholder. Okay. This.
That link you just posted goes to a 404 not found.
Does it?
Yes, sir.
Didn't. Jeez. HTTPS floral.dev. Let's try it this way. How about this one? There you go. That one it should find. That one better?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. And the first one working? I mean, the second one working? The JSON placeholder one?
Yep.
Good. All right. So yeah, can it be anything? Well, you can create your own. I think in the documentation on that, it tells you how you can build your own endpoints like that. There is a cost to it, I think, but you can set up your own dummy endpoints if you wanted to do that stuff. Like you were working on something there where the UI doesn't exist yet or something like that. You could play around with it. All right. Let's see. Definitely usually if you have a guy that has a bunch of websites that you would not need to get info from. Yes, that is true. It's also useful if you have if part of what you're doing is actually going out to external websites as well. It doesn't have to be all internal websites. Obviously, we're going to an external one now, but yeah, a lot of times, especially the microservice model sets it up so that you have a bunch of these services sitting out there that are REST based, and your whatever you're going to use, your you know, the back end for the front end or the UI directly, or however you're going to set the stuff up, has to talk to all those different services, and they all based on REST. So you have to be able to make calls out to those. The way we used to do it at the company I'm working at now is we would set up, we would use the Swagger. There's an NSWAG utility that would go in and look at the endpoint, the microservice, and build a client that you could then embed inside your code. And that works fine. The problem with it is that there's a maintenance issue that you have to worry about, because if you update the microservice, you have to come back and make sure you update the client code at the same time. It gets a little tedious after a while, which is why we've been using this a little bit more. So any other questions about this? I was going to get into testing next, if that's okay, unless you want to see something different. All right. So one of the problems with testing is that you end up testing the internet when you're testing stuff with endpoints that you have to hit with an HTTP. So to get around that, Floral has a testing piece to it. So I'm just going to call it test project. That's fine. Do you guys use unit testing at where you're working? I know a lot of people don't like it, don't like to do testing for some reason, but we do like it where I am. So, all right. So this is XUnit. If you're not familiar with it, it's very similar to NUnit or other things. There's facts and you make assertions and things like that. We're not going to make anything fancy here. So what we will be doing, though, is we will be using Floral. And of course, I have to add it, don't I? Oh, geez. I always forget this part until I go type it and it says, why isn't it there? But you can see this again for those who weren't here when I first set this up. Since we've got a few extras, we still only want that one. That's fine. It brings in both. Yes, wonderful. Thank you. Okay. There we go. And yes, I will be using that later, but I need this. That. And by the way, we're just scratching the surface on what is in this thing. There's a bunch of other stuff that I haven't even talked about yet, but I wanted to get through as much as possible in the time we've got, which is not much time now. All right, so you've got this test. So let's just throw some things out here for this first test. And do it a couple different ways. This one, we're just going to do, and why is it giving me an error? Oh, well, that's why. Because it should be, it would help if I went async in here, wouldn't it? Thought it would do that already for me. All right, there we go. Okay, so yeah, there's a comment in there. We can take that comment. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, I'm going to tell so this is the HTTP test piece. And I'm going to instantiate a new version of that. And then what we're going to do is say, whenever you make a call to anything, we are going to respond with server error 500. Okay. Now, so here's something else I didn't mention before. There is this exception that Floral also gives you, so you can do a little bit more investigation into what's going on. I can leave this the way it is or not. But if I do this, it will throw an exception, and it will throw a 500. And it will, this will pass now, because it doesn't matter what I call over here. I'm just making a call, pending a segment, and then making the call. This is always going to return the 500 because I told it to, right? So if you have code that you're testing, and in this case, it looks kind of stupid, but if you had your service out there and it was making calls out externally, what you would do is you would set this up here, the HTTP test part here, and then you'd instantiate your service and make the call to the service that you would normally make. When it hits that Floral line that makes the call out to the external service, it will return back a 500, so you can test your error code if you wanted to. So this does work, and if we run it, oops, I didn't want to do that. That was stupid. Sorry. Yeah, go away. You're not doing anything. Stop. All right, so if I run the tests, it is running the test. It's on a different screen, but there it is. Building it. And it's, in case you're wondering, that's what's going on. That's what we're waiting for. And it's completed and it's successful. So I was happy. But we can do other things with it too. So let's take a look at, let's create a new test. So not only can we say, all right, well, there's errors, well, we can also get this out of the way. I know I could make it smaller, but I don't like it down at the bottom. I can also do things like this, where I can say, hey, when I make my call, I want it to respond with something specific. So I want to respond with this text, some result, and a value of 200. So it's going to come back and it's going to pass. So I can test different things coming back. And this is not actually going to make a call out to this location, but it's going to, I'm passing in some headers just so that you can pass in headers, get async. It's going to say, hey, it's 200, and this is what I got back for the result. And if I run this, it should come back green and be happy. And it does. Okay. So you can do things like that. And I'm pushing a little bit because I know the next sessions are starting soon. But let me just get through these last two examples just to show what's available. So I can also say, hey, I'm going to have this result come back, which is obviously a JSON object. And I can make calls to different locations, or to different calls. So sometimes you'll have in your code, you'll have multiple calls to Floral, to some external source. They can be the same one, they can be different ones, it doesn't matter. And what I'm doing here is I'm saying for the first call that you call, that's a get, respond with this result set and a 200. For the second one, where you're going to do a patch, respond with a result of it works in a JSON object and a 204. Okay, so you get the idea. If I do this kind of thing, what will happen is, as I make my calls, there's the get, there's the patch. What will happen is these will execute, and on the get, I'll return back this result, and on the post patch, I'll return back this result, and I can test for those things as well. So again, a lot of times you'll have multiple calls out. So sometimes you might say, well, I have to go out and get some record from some place, and then I have to manipulate and do something with it and then send it back again. And that's where you would be able to do your testing without actually having to make those calls out there. And then finally, the last thing you can do, if you really need to actually go out and call an external service, you can. So in this case, I'm going to say, okay, well, for calls that go to this endpoint, I want to allow real HTTP, which means I actually want to go out and get it. I want to go out and hit the actual endpoint that exists out in the world. So in this case, it actually is going to come back and it's going to find Bill Wolf in the result, because this is the meetup page for Philly.net and his name's on it. So if I ran this one, it would actually work. And if I run them all, they should all work. And what you'll see, I'll let this sit here, is once this gets through, there they go. You can see that this one actually did take longer because it actually went out to the internet and pulled something back. So the other ones are pretty quick, but there you go, you get the idea. So that's testing. So you can do a whole bunch of stuff with testing. Again, I'm just scratching the surface for this stuff, but this is where using Flurl in your code and using it for your testing really makes it really shine, that you can do a lot of this stuff without having to play around with trying to make things work in the real world. So I am a little over. Any questions? Comments? Hopefully you'll find this useful.